Could be the petrodollar window being closed because it replaced the dollar in the 70s.
Exactly. Something's happening. We don't know. We're going to continue covering this in the next week or two. But here is a tweet from Lucas Nuzzi. Take a step back and look at the magnitudes. Bitcoin settled the equivalent of $2.1 trillion in the first half of 2021. That is 10% of the US GDP.
Right. Well, we're heading toward a global Bitcoin standard, and fiat monies are going to disappear completely, not just because of inflation, but because people are using Bitcoin as a unit of account, as well as a medium of exchange, as well as a store of value. And these volumes in Bitcoin suggest that that's exactly what's happening, with El Salvador making it legal tender, Nigeria becoming Bitcoinization-sized. And the numbers speak for themselves. The magnitudinous quantity of these humongous numbers is not to be denied. It's like there's a huge meteor coming to planet Earth called Bitcoin, and the astronomers look through their telescope and they say, it looks freaking big. And people are saying, nah, it can't be that big, can it? And they're like, no, it's really big, and it's gonna hit. And once it hits, if you're not prepared, it'll be too late.
The whole time that we've been doing Keiser Report, it's been all about the magnitudes, because we've seen the magnitudes of the fraud, the magnitude of the volatility, the crashes, the magnitude of the asset purchases by the Fed. Now the extraordinary magnitude of the stimulus packages that have been deployed across the United States in the past year, but also across Europe and Australia, other parts of the world. Now we have, remember, we noted that the IMF during the election season last year in the United States, they dropped the notion that the IMF says that the world needs a new Bretton Woods, right? Well, here's some news out this past week, and Lynn Alden reported it. The IMF approved a round of new SDRs valued at $650 billion US to be credited to the reserves of member nations. She follows that up with, this more than triples the SDR market cap outstanding and is another small step towards a more diversified or multi-currency global reserve system.
Okay, this is the long simmering conversation on this show, going back years, going back to when Jim Rickards, famous author, writer of many fine books, had talked on this very show about the IMF and the SDR, the special drawing right, as being the currency that will ultimately absorb all of the bad debts on all the balance sheets of all the central banks in this huge roll-up. I mean, a $100 trillion credit facility that'll be funded by the SDR, the special drawing right, which is the currency of the IMF, would provide a huge bailout to the central banks, who provided a huge bailout to the Wall Street banks and banks around the world as a way to keep this Ponzi scheme going. So it looks like the timing is now that Christine Lagarde is, of course, used to be at the IMF. She's over at the ECB, so she will be a willing participant in this whole in continuation of the global Ponzi scheme. The numbers are humongous, but for all the multi-trillions of dollars worth of money printing and the quadrillions of dollars worth of derivatives, remember the Bitcoin hash rate runs in the quintillions. So it's running bigger numbers. The humongous numbers of Bitcoin are 50, 60 quintillion calculations per second. That's the magic of it. That's the beauty of it, that no matter how much they can print, the hash rate will always be well ahead. And that's going to be a permanent fixture going forward until all the fiat money is vaporized and goes to zero, like it all does. But it'll all happen globally at once. And the ensuing phoenix of hard money lotus flower will bloom into our collective unconscious, and we'll see the face of God. As I'm predicting, before I leave this show, I predict our audience will see the face of God.
Yeah, so, these are just the sort of, chaos and signs of disintegration that start before any empire collapses. And when we look back in history, you could see it. It often happens at a fourth turning. It could be a coincidence, but research that. We've covered the fourth turning before. But I think it's also certainly when you talk about this roll-up, we had essentially a roll-up in 1971, August 15th, 1971, when the U.S. went off the gold standard. It was essentially a way to do, it was a modern version of a blank slate, right? So the debt jubilees that they used to have back in the days of Mesopotamia, where the new emperor, the new king, or the new ruler would just like wipe out the slates of all the debts that the farmers and people owed. They would be able to start anew and start the economy afresh. So that's what happened in 1971. Like all the debts we owed, the trade imbalance to the United Kingdom at that point, just start with a blank slate. And now we're at the end game of this. And you're starting to see the edge, the disintegration of the fabric of the financial universe at the edge when you see the magnitudes of money printing, the magnitudes of stimulus. That's the disintegration, that they're ready for a reset. They're already signaling it. They're telling you, the IMF is saying we need a new Bretton Woods. The World Economic Forum and UN are saying we need a great reset. So they've already been telling you and signaling to people. If you care to look, it's there. So I think whatever comes next, and it's probably a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, that they'll roll it up again, or possibly tied to an SDR, roll it up again, and we'll start anew.
Right. Well, going back to Nixon, so he basically had three choices. He could either A, the U.S. default on its sovereign debt, B, the U.S. would give Britain the gold that they owed Britain.
Yeah.
C, that there would be a soft default in the form of swapping the gold owed for paper money, the dollars. So he chose option C. They chose money printing. Instead of adhering to the rule of law, the covenants of a bond are the rule of law. And so Nixon decided to ignore the rule of law, as he had done many times in many other occasions. And he gave the Brits a big bag of paper money to settle the debt.
Yeah. And
this set the precedent, really, for modern central banking, because what did Alan Greenspan do in 1987? When the stock market crashed because of the speculation that had been going on using illegal program trading, they decided to simply come in and bail everybody out, and then that set the stage for multiple bailouts: the 2008 bailout, the bailout of the COVID bailout, and the ongoing bailout, the rolling bailout, and now the SDR is another bailout.